Hello and welcome to today's joint episode. I am so excited. I am Shawn Patrick from the Just Call Dad podcast, and I am sitting with Josh. And I had the opportunity to connect with Josh, and I'm going to let him tell you about his organization, what he's doing, and how he is becoming a better version of himself. But dads are all about bettering themselves, yet we don't know where to start. And so for me, I've gone through some different things in my life that I never knew how to get through if I couldn't find someone who was just a call away. And that's kind of what happened with Josh. I ran into Josh on social media. I was going through something, he was going through something, and all of a sudden we created a friendship. And so on the whiteboard behind me, you can see we've titled today's episode For the Health of It. And so again, Josh, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, but that's a little bit about me.
No, I appreciate the introduction, and I'm just so excited to first off made the connection that you and I have made, and I'm really excited to see where this continues to go. I think we've got some really cool ideas and some fun things planned. But I am Josh Bostic. I'm the founder of Rebel Health Collective, and essentially what my goal is to bring together a community of people that are going through some sort of a healthcare challenge. It can be a diagnosis, it can be a chronic illness, it could be someone who's a caregiver trying to find help and tips. And really, what I'm trying to do is bring information and patient stories and real life experience that aren't talked about in the four walls of a doctor's office. So these are not your normal healthcare practices, go in and get a prescription. These are things like diet and health and holistic ways of improving your well-being. So I think we've got a cool crossover where it's really just all about improving and being the best version of yourself and having a community to support you and pulling from those people and building off each other's ideas.
What's so cool about that, Josh, is we're just hanging out right now and we're getting a chance to talk to each other, and hopefully other people can do the same thing. I think the biggest barrier sometimes maybe to dads is they don't talk to each other. Maybe we do in passing, or we say, "How you doing? I'm doing fine." When in reality, like, we're not doing fine. But we also don't want to talk about that either because, man, I don't want to be down all the time. I don't want to be talking about all the things that are hurting on my body. I don't want to talk about all the things that are like imperfect about me. Sometimes I just want to talk about, hey, how'd that football game go? Or hey, did your kid just fall down off their tricycle or off their bike like mine did and cry for 20 minutes and you had to learn to emotionally regulate yourself, or you felt like a failure or whatever. Or maybe your kid just did something hilarious and you want to talk about it. But when we walk through different health journeys, sometimes it's hard to see the beautifulness and the beautiful moments around us when we're stressed or hurting. And so sometimes it's nice to know, just like somebody else is hurting. You don't even have to know everything about it, but just to know, like, hey, I'm not alone, makes you feel a little bit better. And I think that's what you and I talked about. It's like, yeah, I don't want to necessarily always talk about all my ailments, but man, it would be really nice to know where I could go if I did need to talk about those, right?
Definitely. Yeah. And what I've found, and we've only been at this since July of last year, so we're still pretty new to this, but everyone I've talked to, they all have something going on. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and to you, you may not have anybody in your family, you may not be a type 1 diabetic, but you have some sort of medical condition, your family has something going on, and just being able to relate and talk through those hardships makes the world of difference rather than having to bottle it up.
Yeah, my daughter was in the NICU. That's why I started this thing. I'm not shy about talking about the anxiety condition that caused in me. I wouldn't even say it caused it; it just brought it out. I was talking to a buddy of mine. I just got off the phone with him. We connected, and he and I were talking about how we don't do a good job as dads of calling each other. I love the guy. We're like family, but I haven't talked to him in over 6 months, and it's not because I don't want to. It's just because honestly, I get so busy and I forget to. And sometimes when we're walking through different health journeys, whether it's your type 1 diabetes or whether it's anything with our life, we get a little lost in the shuffle because we're just trying to survive. We're trying to figure out, like, how do I do this, right? And so today, honestly, the cool part about our podcast is neither you or I are the lead on this, right? Like, we're just talking. And I think we need to create a conversation for the health of it, because conversation, I think, is the first healer in health. And that's like something that I want to start with this podcast is, how can we just talk about it? Maybe I don't know what it's like to be a type 1 diabetic, but maybe I know what it's like to have some other ailment, or lose someone to cancer, or to deal with that. And so we're all walking through it.
We are. And I really do think that it's something that we need to try and strive for as dads is to have that circle and that closer community than we have. I mean, my wife goes out with her girlfriends. We have 4 or 5 couples that we're really close with. They go out on a monthly basis. I probably haven't gone out with the guys in a year and a half, 2 years. Um, it's usually we get together because the girls are going out and we're the babysitters, which is awesome and fun. But it's just total chaos, and we're not having any like meaningful conversations. It's, hey, how's it going? How's work going? What are you guys up to? Things like that. Any big trips coming on? It's not talking about the more in depth personal levels, and I honestly don't have anybody like that I can reach out to and call. And I have my wife, of course, but I don't have a guy group that if I just had a crappy day at work, came home, car broke down, child's just all over the place, I don't have anybody on speed dial. And I think we really need to be able to have those people.
Yeah. Well, I think what's hard with that, Josh, is like the vulnerability inside of that. Like, well, we talked about this when I walked through the health journey that I've been through over the last year. I got pneumonia in January of last year, and it kickstarted like an entire process in my body that just kicked my butt, man. It was like almost humbling and embarrassing. I was like, dude, why am I winded walking up the steps? I just ran a half marathon last year. Like, dude, what in the world just happened to my back? It feels like I'm dying and I'm not sure if I am or not. How do you I guess it's like how do you have that conversation with your buddy? Because when you see him, there's like this mask that we put on that says I'm good. And you actually kind of are for a short amount of time. And I think that's like something that we just need to do more of as dads is be like, you know what? I got to take this mask off. Like last week, I thought I was dying, or last week, like I had a terrible day, and I don't know. I don't know what that means. And maybe listening to this podcast will just get somebody to be like, hey, like I guess like it's okay to not feel great. And then like within the same token, like it doesn't have to be that. Like I don't have to just, oh, I don't feel good and then be angry all the time and be frustrated with my kids because maybe I need to get it out to someone who's not my wife. I think my wife gets kind of tired of hearing the same thing from me all the time and I don't want to be a burden to her and so sometimes I just don't talk at all. Yeah, I just wonder, like, I don't know, community. There's a lot of communities out there I've connected on my podcast with, and I know you have too. So hopefully, through all those intertwined webs, we can really start for the health of it with just mental health. Maybe that's really what this is all about. Like, how do you heal your mind first? Because your body is an important component, but your mind is what directs your body. I mean, it's crazy. We don't even have pain receptors in our body. They're all in our mind. That blows my mind a little bit, like literally and figuratively. So, yeah, we got to start somewhere. We got to start in the mind, I think.
You do. Yeah. And, I think if you start having that conversation, if you can take that mask off with your friend and say, hey, we're having financial troubles, which is just terrible. No one wants to talk about that. But if you can talk to somebody about that, I guarantee their mask is going to come off and they've got stuff going on too. And it may not be financial, it may be medical, it may be, stuff going on with their parents, but everybody has stuff going on. And taking that first step and opening that line of communication is something that I think we're all terrified to do. But once we take it, it's there. And like you said, it doesn't have to be doom and gloom all the time. It doesn't have to be a monthly
Right.
sync just
Yeah.
to talk about all the bad. But if the mask is off, you can have a good time and still have those meaningful conversations that we're just kind of burying deep down.
Yeah, when we first talked, the day that we talked, I had like a terrible day, but I was able to like pretend I was fine when I talked to you because it was actually healing to talk. And so that's actually kind of cool too, right? I could be like, I'm going to take my mask off for a minute. I'm going to tell you how terrible this is, but then all of a sudden I feel better. Sometimes just saying it was bad is all I needed to say. I don't really need to go so in depth. I think that's one thing dads are afraid of sometimes is when you take the mask off, it's going to be just an explosion of things coming out of your mind. But sometimes it's just like saying it is all you need to do. And so for me, there'll be times where I go in detail and like probably too much detail. As somebody who has ADHD and a little bit of OCD with that, I sometimes hyperfixate on things. I drive myself crazy. And I don't mean that in the wrong way, but I know if I'm driving myself crazy, I drive my wife crazy because I have to make sure the lights are turned off before bed at least 6 times or the garage doors down. But I do that with my mental health sometimes too. Like, am I okay? Am I good? And then those of us that struggle with different physical issues, we can fixate on those as well. And sometimes all it takes is just doing what I just did and being open enough to say, "Yep, I'm a little crazy, but here's what it is." And then you don't feel as crazy. Just hearing somebody else may have just heard that phrase and been like, oh, that makes me feel better to know Shawn feels that way or Josh feels that way or whatever it might be.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I love my wife. She's my biggest supporter, but I know there's times that I drive her crazy. And I think we have just this persona that we're supposed to have it together, and you don't want to bog down your wife. You want to kind of be able to take the load and put it on your back. And I think that's where having a group of guys to be able to vent with helps a lot, because you can come to your wife and have all these, talks and try to plan for the budget and the schedules and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, you're still kind of trying to hold it together in a sense. No matter how vulnerable you can be with your wife, you still want to try to be that head of the household and be able to kind of keep everything together. And so I think in those situations, we're not totally upfront and vulnerable like we could be.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I would love for you to run me through an exercise of like what's a good question that you would ask somebody who's on your podcast. If they were to come on your podcast or log in and listen, how would you how would you get someone like me talking? I want you to put me under a question test, if you will, of like give me a challenge right now, a Rebel Health challenge. I'm ready. Give me something that
So,
pops in your head.
I mean, honestly, one of the questions that I like to start with is, instead of like
Yeah.
introduce yourself, like tell
Yeah.
me your story. And because
Okay.
that kind of opens it up to where do they want to go with it. So, what's your story?
So, my story is one that's layered, one that is hidden with this idea of like confidence, but really it's anxiety. And my whole life, I've interpreted anxiety as confidence. And so I would be the most confident person in the room. I went to school. I was an All-American in track and field. I had ups and downs in sports. I quit some sports. I kept with some sports, which actually is why I write books the way that I do. I turned that into a career of teaching and coaching. I just stepped down as the head coach for 15 seasons, a very successful program. We went from worst to best. And like I had all this pride all wrapped up in like what I could do for people, not necessarily like winning and losing, but just feeling good about helping people. Became a dad 6 years ago. Um, no one can prepare you to be a girl dad. So I have three daughters. I always talk about that. I was more wired when I first had kids. I thought to be a dad of sons. That's all I really knew. But honestly, now that I look at it, I realize I've been preparing to be a girl dad my whole life. And so it's kind of special to me because I realize how equipped that I am. I'm an elementary school educator. I work with about 800 kids a week, which is a lot of students. And you don't really realize all the emotional toll that takes on you until about 2 years ago when our youngest went through an experience in the NICU. My wife was in the hospital for a month and a half beforehand. She was in the hospital for a month afterwards. She was 2 pounds, 2 months early. And it was a whole year leading up to it. It's like this buildup of anxiety because like we knew something was going to be quote wrong. We didn't know what was going to be wrong because we had to go in weekly for checks. So it's like you don't realize what that's building in that anxiety piece inside of you. And so for me, I was pretty fine throughout the whole process. I held it together well. I was strong for my wife, and I actually didn't fall apart until about a year and a half after it, which is interesting. That's when I lost all of my hair. I got stressed out in ways I never had injuries before. I couldn't put my socks on from the pain in my back. I thought I was dying from all sorts of things. Like I would. Maybe I'm a hypochondriac, so maybe I thought this was, this was wrong. This was wrong. This means I'm got this right. Dr. Google, can always give us the best diagnosis, right? And so, as somebody who helps everybody, I mean, I'm helps people with their, healing their muscles. I help people run faster. I help people learn. I help people move. I couldn't do any of those things, and so I decided to write through this process. And so I wrote a bunch of books while I was going through this, but really as a healing process. And so for me right now, that's my story in a nutshell is like, okay, this is Shawn. Shawn's learning what his goal is in life, but not really what he is anymore, but like who he is. And so dad is a name that I put on my jersey. I like to hang my Michael Jordan jersey behind me and my old track jersey as well to remind me that in life we put on different jerseys for different seasons of our life. And so we all have those names that we hold on to. So I think that's my best answer to you. I think that now I'm learning that my story is one that's not only layered, but that's actually kind of special and can help people. And I never thought my story was very good. And so to give like kind of an ending to that story for now, to put a bookend on it. My wife and my daughter are doing pretty well. I mean, my daughter's tiny, but she's doing well. There's lots of positives. It was almost like when I realized that everything was like okay, is when I fell apart. So I think that's kind of interesting. It's like as dads, we stick it together and we hold it together until that like good moment too. So I know it's kind of a long and short version, but there you go. That's my story. I don't know if you want to do any follow-ups on that, but that's it.
Was there a pivotal moment where you mentioned that you had confidence, what you thought was confidence, but it was really anxiety? Is there a portion or a moment where you're like, it all just came came up and you knew that it was anxiety rather than confidence?
Yeah, so I was walking in to pick my daughter up from school after teaching a really long day, and I felt weird, and I actually thought I was having like a heart attack or a stroke, and I collapsed, and nobody was around, and I crawled my way into a bathroom stall, and I'm like, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. I had always interpreted that feeling that I got before that happened like a 4x4 relay, like I was ready to go. And that moment, I couldn't interpret it that way. I was like, this is something's wrong. Something's so wrong. I could like usually my brain could shift that anxious feeling to like I'm gonna get after it, and it just was like
Yeah.
something was broken and couldn't do that, and it was like I don't even know how to describe it other than that.
Wow. So you think you were taking that anxiety, kind of bottling it up, mixing it over into a different feeling and using it as like motivation in a sense almost, or, like to make
Yeah,
productivity or something?
I think so. I think I actually spent almost my entire existence doing that, and it was weird because it never like gave me a physical symptom, but this time it did. My all my legs like locked up and my body froze, which you kind of get before a 4x4 relay. Your juices are flowing, you're ready to go,
Yeah.
but it
The
almost that
nerves are
yeah.
going.
Yeah, so like the best way I could describe it is that's it. And so then like I go to the doctor and they said that was a panic attack, and I'm like, I don't even what? I'd never had one, so I didn't actually. When you've never had something and then you have it happen to you, right? You've had that. It's like you don't have a frame of reference for it. So now I have a frame of reference for it. Like, am I kind of afraid of it? Yeah, but at least I know what that is. But yeah, it was wild because, like I said, it was like that rush usually that I felt could transition immediately into productivity or like energy. But my body, like,
Hmm.
it just, I don't, it just interpreted it completely different and in a way that I'd never had it happen before.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we talked when we first tagged up, and I think everybody has one of those moments where it's a pivotal moment and life is never the same after that. And for me, it was our son was like 4 months old, maybe. My wife was out on a work trip. I had recently been diagnosed as a type 1, and things just weren't going well. I didn't have good control over my blood sugar. I was constantly going high and low, and every day was just a different day. I never had like a couple of days that I could line up and things were like semi normal. And so she's out of town. It's just me and my 4 month old son, and my blood sugar just starts plummeting. And for those that don't know, that basically you can go into a coma if your blood sugar gets low enough. I mean, you can pass out. It can get pretty hairy. And so I realized that like I am not safe for my son. I need to put him in his crib and just let this pass. And so he was just in his crib, bawling like a 4 month old, wondering why he's not being comforted. And I'm just sitting on the floor with my back up to the crib, just at the lowest point I've ever been in. And I just, from that point on, I was like, this isn't it. This isn't how things can be. I'm not going to live the rest of my life like this. And that moment is when I really took my first step into like going outside, just what the doctor had said. I started reaching out to other type 1s, figuring out how to work out better, how to manage my blood sugars better. And all of those people that I met along the way are what's made me want to start Rebel Health Collective. Just because if I wouldn't have met some of the people that I did and found some of the podcasts that I'd found, I could still be in that same position with my back up against the crib, useless for my son. But that's not where I'm at today.
Second time you told me that story, and I think I almost cried again, honestly, because there's power in that, man. Like I can't, I So I talked to a guy named Jeff Barry yesterday, and Jeff wrote a USA Today bestseller. It's called "Go to Hell, Old Miss." It's pretty cool. It's a phrase that his dad said as he was a B-52 bomber in the World War II, and he was a prisoner of war. And so he wrote a historical fiction book about this. And in the book, like he writes about this idea of what lengths would a father go to save his daughter, and that's what the whole premise of the book is about. And it's a story that he like kind of integrates together, and it makes me think of that. And I got emotional when he was sharing that too, because it makes me feel like that's you and me, with your back up against the wall of a crib, with me crawling into a place that I've went to a million times, and not knowing if I was going to make it, and then coming back to with my daughter in the car, not knowing how I got there. And I know maybe like people listening to this are like, I've never been through something that serious. And I'm going to be real for a second because we go from silly to serious. I'm going to be really serious for people. You're one thing away from that happening if you allow yourself to get to that point. And I think that's what Josh, you and I are trying to say is like, there's a line that if you can mine that line, you may never get to where Shawn is or was, or where Josh is or was. Like you might be dealing with what we're dealing with, but you can do it better. And if I can help one person do that and you can help one person, our lives are better. Because in reality, Josh, we are one moment away from the best or worst moment of our life. And we have to be constantly aware of what stress is doing to our body, or honestly not trying to be so tough that you think you can't ask for help. And so Rebel Health Collective for me, I'm learning more about what you're doing, but it's really what we're doing right now. It's a conversation. It's talking about it. It's pushing people outside of their comfort zone into something that might be a better option for them. Not saying that the medical field is bad, not saying that those things are bad, but saying, hey, what if there's another option? What if there's a better way to look at this that could potentially not maybe not save your life, but maybe, but instead improve who
Yeah,
you are today. So I think that's really powerful.
definitely. Yeah, and you touched on a really important thing there. I am by no means saying that the medical system should be thrown to the wayside, that doctors aren't good. There are amazing doctors doing amazing things every day. But the truth of it is, there's a lot of sick people and there's only so many doctors. So if you
Mm.
can find a support network and have resources outside the four walls of the hospital, the doctor's office, that's what I'm trying to provide is people that can lean on other resources. But just want to make sure that
Yeah.
people know
Well,
doctors
no,
are
I think that's
amazing, nurses are
important.
amazing. It's
Yeah,
all really important.
but I think sometimes people either go one way or the other, right? We're either all in, this is holistic, or we're all in, this is the medical field. And I think there's a bridged gap somewhere in the middle that you're trying to kind of find. And I think for me, I'm working with a couple of different NICU organizations to get people more time with their kids in the NICU, to get them books in the NICU. That's my whole mission, is to write kids books that are all about emotional competition so that I can help all kids, but specifically, can we help NICU parents have a book to read to their kids? Can we help that? And if we would not have had the nurses in the NICU who knew what they were doing, my daughter would not be here today. And the doctor, there's a whole story behind that, but she saved my wife's life and the baby's life during the emergency surgery that I was watching. And so that's I think part of the thing for me. And it's hard for me to talk about it because it's really not my story to tell. It's Lauren's story, my wife. But it was like a narrator for that story. And I think that's why it's hard for us as dads oftentimes, because we narrate so much that when it is actually our story, or we're dealing with something from our story, we just don't really know where to go. Right. And so we either go one way or the other. And I think what you're saying is there is a middle. There exists in a middle. We could find some balance there. And it really might not be that big of a change from what you're currently doing. It might just be, hey, don't eat this, or do eat this, or um, here's another option. So I honestly think like dads need more options like that. And I feel like that's what for the health of it's all about, is providing that. And we were just talking before we got on the call, like, heck, we could get a study in here. We could go through and say, this many percentage of men are dealing with this, blah, 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 and then go for it. Like, I think that would be cool, jumping on here every so often and talking about common health things for men that maybe that are not being talked about on either side of the spectrum.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so many things that we can be doing daily that we're not, that are going to keep us from having that pivotal moment like we just touched on. I mean, our diets are crap. We're not doing good exercise. We're eating out of plastic containers that have been sitting under a heat lamp all day long. I mean, there's things like that that we ourselves should be doing that have nothing to do with doctors. I mean, they're only coming in because we're getting so sick and having to go in to see them. There's a lot we can be doing on the front end, and I think that's one of the cool things that we're going to try to bring some awareness to.
Yeah, and it's simple stuff. I mean, the stuff you just listed, I do every day. Even though I know not to, I'm tired and I grab something like that. Or just today, I cooked well. I made protein pancakes for the family. I made eggs. I'm trying to eat well, and then I see a cookie sitting over on the table, and I feel immediate shame. But we also don't need to feel that. It's okay to branch out and have
No.
things, but it's a balance. And I think dads like have a hard time finding that balance because I crave, be honest with you, when I'm having a tough day, it's a really weird craving. I love the Arby's chicken wrap, buffalo chicken wrap. Who knows why? I actually think the reason is because I had it one day when I was going through different experiences and I had a good day. And so we crave things that are not great for us, but every so often, if I want to go have an Arby's wrap, I shouldn't shame myself for that. But it's about moderation. It's about when do I do it? It's about how often I do it. It's about knowing that, yeah, my stomach might not be well after I eat that. It's like it's the awareness of that, but there's a mental health component to what we choose to eat or not to eat as well. And we have to be cautious because I think we don't want to go too far one way or the other and lose ourselves in the process.
Right? It's that spectrum. You don't want to be eating Taco Bell 3 meals a day for a month straight, but at the same time, you got to have some leniency. You got to be able to go to a restaurant and eat out with your friends and not, be OCD and just freaking out about if you're eating some chips or something like that. I mean, there's a balance for sure. And I think one of the cool things that my wife and I are trying to really do is, we're trying to be healthy and not be just total health nuts, but we're finding that by doing so, eating and cooking breakfast like you mentioned this morning, we're incorporating our son so much more. He's so much more interested in helping out around the kitchen or playing in the garden. And, I say playing because it's just straight destruction, but he's out there with
Yeah.
us in the dirt, in the mud, and we're getting a lot more family time together rather than getting in the car, driving to Arby's and getting that wrap and coming back home
Hmm.
where it's more
Right.
quality time. And so it's healthier, but at the same time, it's making our family unit stronger too.
Yeah, and I think like just like your son in the garden, so I'm trying to do a better job. My middle daughter gets up early. I like the morning. I want to be all by myself and I love my kids, but I don't want my kids or my wife awake at the same time that I get up. I like to have at least an hour where I can become a nicer Shawn, to be better for everybody else. But it has not been happening recently. Our youngest will get up. It was 3 in the morning the other day. She got up and said, "Hey, Daddy, can I get up and watch a show?" And it hit me kind of hard because I was like, "Hold up, why is that her first thought?" And I said, "No, number one, no. Number two, it's 3 in the morning." And so then she laid down beside me. We tried to fall back asleep, but I don't know how much sleep we got at that point. But then we get up about 5, right? And I said to her, I said, "My commitment is I have no screens for the first hour of my day." And she looked at me like, but I was able to instill in her a behavior that I do. And I'm like, "Honey, I can't run like I used to. I used to get up and run. I'm dealing with that injury, but I get up and I move. So I stretch, I foam roll, I do my breathing. And recently I've been doing, it's cold outside, so I'll do walking lunges in the house. And I can't go fully into my lunges because of my injury, but partial lunges are better than no lunges. So I'm doing all these things, and she's literally following me at 5 in the morning, doing all the stuff. And doesn't think it's crazy, and it's just normal to her. And my goal would be, can that become a behavior that's just kind of instilled in her, like the gardening behavior for your son? And so that is important. And I think sometimes as a dad, it's way easier. At least I'm guilty of this. Yeah, you can watch a show because it makes it easier on me. Yeah, you can do this. So like the more, I'm not saying I'm perfect because I'm probably going to mess up tomorrow, but the more wins I can stack up in that column, I think the better we're going to do as dads.
You mentioned that, instilling that stuff in her is important. I It's important, but I think we are underemphasizing how important it is. I had a doctor on the podcast a couple episodes ago, and I was asking like, how do we how do we fix this? How do we get to a spot where you can go in and see a doctor for more than 15 minutes and have like a personalized treatment plan, not just the one size fits all, here's the medication. And he gave just a really great example. And he said basically, the healthcare system right now is like an aircraft carrier. It's this humongous, just massive ship. And we've got a couple people on the back with an oar trying to do a 180. And he's just like, you're not going to be able to. It's not going to be overnight. And he mentioned that it's going to be families and generations doing the things like you just mentioned, where you're getting rid of screen time, you're teaching them to grow things in the garden, and it's instilling those kind of acts that are going to trickle down for multiple generations. And that's how we keep more people out of the doctor's offices, which is the only way that we're going to ultimately fix the predicament that we're in.
Well, I
And
was
so
listening
I
to the
just,
Ready State. Same thing. Same thing. The Ready State podcast. What you just said. He had so Kelly Starrett. Do you know the Ready State? Kelly and Juliet Starrett. They're amazing. What you just said is that the doctor said on there. Doctors are not meant to fix the problem. They're meant to help with the problem. They are not like when we send all this. Like for example, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's exactly your point. The point you're making. If we just send a bunch of people in there, they're not going to be any good. They can't do it. And they were talking about mobility, health, way you eat. Like, not going to fix it. Like, you have to do it on your own. They cannot, let me not do a double negative. I choose to eat the Arby's wrap. They can't tell me not to, right? That's my decision. And I need to be able to deal with the consequences of that and not ask them to deal with them. And then those people have outlying conditions that are having those that are not based on choices. Those doctors can help. They can actually integrate what they're supposed to be doing. But those of us that can actually make a change, we can help the generations, ourselves and that generation, right? And I think that's what the doctor said. I love that. Sorry to interrupt, but that was fantastic.
no, no, you're spot on. And I think, I mean, you're totally right. There's things like type 2 diabetes that we can be fixing by our healthy habits, the way we eat, the way we move, the way we sleep, those kind of things that we need to take ownership for. The doctors can give you a prescription to help lower your blood sugar, but if you don't take those actions on and live a healthier lifestyle, they're just going to keep upping the dose because you're just going to need more and more medication. But then there's people like myself, I have to have insulin. I have to have some
Right.
sort of external source of insulin or I'm not going to make it another month. And so I need the doctors for that. And I need them to help me understand my ratios for carbs, my basal, my bolus. I mean, there's so many things that go into it. And I need them for that, for like a quality of life and to be able to live for several years. So
Right.
there's definitely kind of two different areas. And both of them have us owning our health and taking, our health into our responsibility.
Yeah, and I think there'll be things that pop up that we can't fix. Like I know for me, I've like on different things that I've gotten, there's some things that like are out of my control, right? I've got a couple little genetic things that are going on for me that my dad had, his dad had, and it's like sometimes you say thanks a lot for the genetics, mom or dad. And even anxiety, like just to talk to is anybody who's anxious, like that's something I'm really passionate about because when the doctor diagnoses you with something, it's almost like you want to help everybody else who has it, but the first person you have to help is you. And so anxiety, when he told me, I'm sitting in the office, I remember it. He's like, yeah, you have anxiety, right? Like I'm going to diagnose you with generalized anxiety. Here are the 5 medications that I recommend, but there's also other options. And honestly, I'm not against medication. Like if that's what you need to survive, like I think that's what you have to do. So hear this podcast and hear like if that's what your doctor's telling you, you listen to your medical professional and you have to, do what's right for you. For me, it was like, I wonder if just a simple awareness that that's what this is can help me along the way make better decisions because I think I'm making something that's naturally existing, maybe even genetically existing, predisposed in my body worse by not being aware of it. So I think raising awareness in your own brain first is like, that's what that emotion is, or that's what that feeling is an understanding. So I think we have to really tread lightly, but also tread strong in that too, because we don't want to just talk about it and not deal with it, whether it's the medication or for me, I'm on a lot of natural supplements for anxiety right now, and they're really helpful and they're working. But if those were to stop working, I wouldn't want to be against, using the medication that I need to function at the level that I want to as a dad, as a human. But like at the end of the day, that we have to be aware of what we're dealing with, right? Because if you weren't made aware you were dealing with type 1 diabetes, you would not live. You wouldn't. Like you being made
Exactly.
aware that you had that saved your life. And so me being made aware that I have anxiety and that that's something that my brain is predisposed to saved my life because now I understand that's what these things are. I don't understand all the triggers, but I understand what it is, right? And I think whether it's a mental health thing, whether it's a physical health thing, or both, because mine kind of coincides. I don't know if you have similar things, but it's just like raising awareness for yourself first and not being embarrassed to say, yeah, that's what I've got going on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a lot of things that we can kind of look inward on and understand, hey, this is a trigger for me. If I get a bad night's sleep and X, Y, and Z happens, I know I'm going to be on the brink of a panic attack. And there's things like that that we can know. And for me, if I get bad sleep, we went to a concert last night that started at 10 o'clock. We didn't get home till 1 o'clock. I got up at the then went to the gym this morning at 5 o'clock. So I got 3.5, 4 hours of sleep. And so I knew today that I'm going to kind of be, my blood sugars are going to be rocky for one. Anything I eat is just going to skyrocket them. So kind of taking today as like a fasted day, not really eating much, just
Mhm.
mostly doing protein. And I also know that I'm going to be a little more feisty. I'm going to have a little bit more of an attitude. And just knowing that, I've been able to tamp that down and kind of be my normal self. Like I got my full 8 hours of sleep. So I think awareness is a huge part of it, like you said. And then how are you going to address it? So you know that this is a trigger, this is a potential thing that you need to avoid or try to, control. And from there, what do you do? Is it a medication? Is it supplements? Is it just mindfulness? Depending on what the situation is.
Right, and a combination of all those things could be your solution too. And I think like
Totally.
for us, we want to keep this our for the health of it like 30-35 minutes because really that's all you should be listening to one of these things for, and hopefully you could even break it up and listen to this in different segments. I'm hopeful. I think actually these, as we're talking, I'm just talking out loud. I think these would be great YouTube clips. Like we could throw this thing up as soon as today, just on YouTube and just like for the health of it and see how it goes because I really feel like we could get this out to people watching this, people just, even if it's 30 seconds of this, just hearing two guys talk about health in a way that's unique might be what they need. And so we're hopeful to get this thing going and maybe even include more people, Josh, in this process that we're doing. Because this could be pretty cool for us if we could kind of grow this. So if you're out there listening to this and you're like, that's kind of cool, these two guys are pretty awesome. Well, thanks, number one. And number two, like if you want to join in on the conversation, if you're a dad, we definitely feel like this is a space for dads. I do things with other groups, athletes, all of that, but I think this one is very specific to dads, to families too. I mean, I don't want to exclude. So, like, if you're a family and you have listen to this and you're like, wow, that's really powerful. Like, I would love to combine our podcast like this every so often to almost like its own thing, its own existing thing for the health of it, where we just get a group together, we start talking about things. Maybe we can bring people that are smarter than you and I even in this circle to have a similar conversation, whether those are people that work with children. I mean, people that work with adults. That's my passion is how can we help our kids? Because you and I are going to struggle, Josh, and we need help, but we don't want to perpetuate that cycle to our kids. We want to perpetuate the right cycle. We want to teach them the right things. So yeah, I don't know about you, but I think this could become something pretty fun.
No, I'm all in. I think we need more just raw, honest conversations, not the dads that are spending 10 grand on a project over the weekend for their kids. Let's talk about the real
Right.
stuff, the things that are going on in the house, things that we're struggling with, like you mentioned earlier, my kids going through this terrible sleep cycle and then it's cascading into X, Y, and Z. So many people are going to relate to that. And those are the things that we
Right.
need to be talking about and making more just aware and have a bigger presence of. So I'm
I'm so
I'm
grumpy
all
when I don't
in.
sleep. I know I'm
I
like
know.
you're talking about not sleeping. I'm such a grump. I was like, I want to write a kid's book called Grumposaurus Rex that's about a dad that gets grumpy when he doesn't get rest or get what he needs. Because I feel like all the books are always written about kids that deal with that. And I think that my kids would think that's hilarious. A grumpy dad that turns into a dinosaur when he gets grumpy.
Yeah,
Um,
I can totally relate to it.
So I don't know. I mean, I think that's where we're going with this. I feel like if we can just continue to raise awareness, we're doing the right thing. I feel like we could help at least one dad. So we're at 38 minutes. I would say for me on my end, I feel like we've had a good talk today for the health of it. We've talked everything from mind to body. We've told our stories in the way that we feel could help those that are listening. But I think more importantly, like we've just had from serious to silly and everywhere in between, which I talk about on my Just Call Dad podcast. I just want to be a dad that's a call away. I don't have to be perfect. I can have a good day or a bad day, but I'm going to be a call away no matter what type of day that I had. And I want to know that if my back is against that crib, my back is against that wall because of my health, that I have somebody there to call as well who can help me out. So Josh, I don't know if you have any parting words for today's just for the health of it episode, but I'd love to hear them.
I think my only thing is you mentioned, kind of growing this group. And I think if there's any dads or family members out there that, have something that has worked well for them, if you're a master gardener, if you have some sort of like an organic, fruit company. I mean, those are the kind of things that we need to talk more about. So it doesn't have to be all about a diagnosis or something crazy that, you're this awesome dad and do this and that. I mean, there's a lot of people who just want to listen to dads being awesome. And I think the things that we're doing every single day are what we need to talk more about. So I really hope that, whether people want to jump on a show and have a conversation with us, or this inspires them to pick up their phone and text that friend that they haven't talked to in 6 months. That's really what I hope that people take away from this is just build your community, have those people that have your back. And if you can't answer the call, have people that will jump in and do it for you right away.
I love it. Well, thanks to anybody who's watched this far into the video or listened this far into the podcast. I hope that we said something today that means something to you. And as I like to end my Just Call Dad podcast with, stop, pause, praise something that went well today. Don't wait to praise the good as you're looking at all the things around you that you could see are better. And as my grandma affectionately told me, sunshine for tomorrow. Always trust that what you do today is going to bring sunshine for your or your kids tomorrow. So let's be a call away today. Let's be that Rebel Health Collective. Let's be those bison that run into the storm. Let's not wait, because today is your day one to be the best you. All right. Thanks for tuning in.